Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here. My name is Dr. Sharon O'Donnell, and I'm the Director of Research here in the School of Nursing and Midwifery. Can't hear me? So you're all very welcome here in person and also for those joining us online. I'm also delighted to be relaunching this lecture series. We started this back in 2012, and a former colleague, Carol King, started this with a group of people here in the school, group of academics and professional staff, Paul and Jenny and others. And we had this series running for about quite a few years, and we had a lot of great success with dynamic discussions and debate. However, during COVID, like many things, it got paused. So delighted to be restarting this again. So I wonder, could I just take a couple of minutes just to explain why we wanted to do this series? Yeah, I just wanted to share this picture of Trinity College with you. This is one of the oldest pictures that I could find of Trinity College. It's taken back in the 1890s. And even before this picture was taken, Trinity was at the bottom of Grafton Street, top of Dame Street, for 300 years before this. And so as an institution, it's borne witness and it's been part of the... Can you hear me? So it's been part of, it's borne witness and been part of the history, the changes in religion, in society, in healthcare that's happened in Dublin City. And it's got a very long and proud tradition of engaging with Dublin society and with Irish people. And it continues to do that. And it's really important that Trinity continues to do that. As a profession, or as two professions, nursing and midwifery, is one of the longest and oldest professions known to mankind and in Ireland. And so we have an even deeper and longer relationship with the people of Dublin and with Irish society. And we have borne witness and we have participated in changing history and landscape and religion and healthcare. Connecting with people is part of who we are. Connecting with the public, conducting research, educating, being practitioners, part of who we are is to connect with people, and we continue to do so. And we do it in lots of different ways. So here's a few of the variety of things we do. In Trinity and in our school, we volunteer, our staff and students volunteer. We open our doors here in the school and in Trinity College, and we say, come in, take a look at what we're doing. Last week we had European Researchers Week, and we had tents in front where, and we invited people in to take a look at what we're doing, to see the fruits of our research. We demonstrate and we articulate our research in drama and in song, in informal papers, and also in the Tell Me About public lecture series. So this is about sharing with everyone, with the public, members of the public, with the rest of Trinity College, the findings of our research, what we do in practice and in education. It's a way of igniting debate and discussion around things that are really important to us, from health and well-being. And so through this series we're going to share research with you, but also topics that we're really interested in. And we're going to get experts in to talk to all of us about them. So I hope you'll join us on our journey this year. We're going to be sharing quite a bit of research with you this year. We're going to have Paul talking to you in a few minutes, but in November we'll have Amanda Phelan, and she'll talk to you about adult safeguarding, building a human rights perspective. In January we'll have an expert talking about mental health and recovery. Then someone in February talking about maternal health, children's health in March, aging and intellectual disability in April, and healthcare and innovation in May. So I hope you enjoy it. I know I certainly will. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Paul Horan. He's going to talk to us about the Crimean War diaries of an Irish nursing nun, Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you can hear me. It's a great privilege to be able to present this piece. A couple of years ago, I managed to get a copy of a diary of an Irish nun who had nursed with Florence Nightingale and her contemporaries in the First Crimean War. And I'm really grateful to my colleague, independent researcher and editor of the Carlow Journal, the historical journal of the Carlow and Historical Archaeological Society, for getting me eyeshot of the original diary. Now, the diary has been published in some form, but to actually see the original diary and how it's laid out is quite important. And the reason it's important is that almost 170 years later, the 170th anniversary of these nuns departing for the Crimea, we're at war in the exact same region in the world all over again. So the presentation aims to present aspects of a study that aim basically to elucidate nursing practices during what might be called now the First Crimean War, through the published diarised lens of a book that was published in London in 1897, which were the memories of the Crimea. Basically the story of Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle, and we look at some other relevant sources so that we can get an experience of what nursing was like in a theatre of war in the 19th century. So from a research perspective, I took a triangulation approach, which was basically, and it's probably a good thing to do with any and old yarn. You know, if you heard three versions of it, somewhere in the middle is a truth. So I looked at the diary, and then I looked at other accounts, and I looked at newspapers from the period, some genealogical data, to get an image of what was going on. And I suppose when we hear about nursing's beginnings, the lady who shouts loudest and was the great self-publicist, Florence Nightingale, and we little know anything about the stories of the other people that were there. And we know from the research that's being done, there was 3 Irish nursing nun diaries, and there's actually a 4th diary, which I'm yet to see, which is the diary of a middle-class English lady who the nuns proselytized so much, she set up her own order of Protestant religion nuns after being in the Crimea. And as part of my rooting around and trying to find out this, that, and the other, I actually found a copy of her Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle's writing desk. Now, I was kind of half hoping when I got eyeshot of this that this was the actual desk that she wrote her diaries on in the Crimea, but apparently this was a gift to her later in life. But notwithstanding, she probably would have written drafts of the published diaries on this beautiful walnut desk with its leather inserts. And the interesting thing is that piece of ephemera is in Galway County Museum. So I went to the local newspapers where she comes from, and I found out that her death took place in the Convent of Mercy in Gurt, County Galway. And she was the last of 16 Irish nurses who went to the Crimea to assist Miss Florence Nightingale in nursing the wounded soldiers and the dying of that war. The deceased belonged to a highly respected old Kilcullen family from County Kildare, and she had reached the venerable age of 93 when she died. It's also quite interesting that almost 40 years after the war had finished, that Queen Victoria honoured her with the Royal Red Cross Medal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And we have a copy of the letters, both letters sent, the invitation letter and the curious reply that Sister Mary Aloysius sent to Queen. So just from a genealogical perspective, it's always good to find out who these people were, where they came from. So she was born Catherine Doyle in Old Kilcullen in 1819. She was one of 7 children. Her parents were John and Mary Doyle. She was one of 3 sisters and 2 brothers, James and Nicholas. Nothing is known of her early education life. On the 30th of April, 1849, Catherine Doyle entered St. Leo's Convent of Mercy in Carlow, my hometown, and she taught at the adjoining school for 5 years during the famine. This is really important. The reason these nurses were so good at working in the war area, that was the Crimea, was that they had witnessed horrific disease, terrible death, millions dying. Just one example, I checked locally in the Carlow area how many people died during the famine, and it's recorded that possibly 3,000 people are buried in the graveyard beside the old workhouse. So these women were very familiar with what were warlike conditions with pestilence and famine. She also attended the local poor and sick throughout the town during a cholera outbreak. And I find this remarkable that more of these people didn't die of cholera themselves. And I think that was just a chance. And we kind of look at COVID nowadays, there's a little bit of a parallel. How is it that some people were caring for the sick and didn't get the disease or die from it, and others did? She professed her religious life in December 1851, and she took the name Mary Aloysius. Most of them seem to have liked the name Aloysius. I don't know why. There's quite a few Mother Mary Aloysiuses. She departed to the Crimea in December 1854, and she served as a nurse until April 1856. What follows really is an account of her Crimean War diary. But before I tell you that bit of the story, I'm going to read you a little piece from the famous poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode, and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. But what makes this really curious is I only found this out a couple of months ago. So there was Sister Mary Doyle with her nursing nun friends in Carlow reading the local newspaper, or maybe a national newspaper. And about 2 months before she died, this fella from Carlow was leading the charge of the Light Brigade. Because it turns out that none other than Captain Lewis Edward Nolan actually led the charge of the Light Brigade, and his family came from a place called Coyle Ballyhoo, near Tinryland, 5 miles outside Carlow. So history is quite a strange thing when you begin to dig. I rather think it's curious as well that the same gentleman wrote 2 books on cavalry tactics. And both books were used for much of the rest of the 20th century or 19th century as tactics and how to do cavalry charges. Seems somewhat ironic to me, seeing as his charge didn't end out too well. There's that picture is a picture from the National Gallery in Ireland, and that's his charger bringing him back across the battlefield. And it's quite a large painting, as I say, within the National Gallery in Ireland. So here's the book that hasn't really seen the light of day for quite some time. You can clearly see it's published by Burton Oakes in London in 1897. This book has had a bit of a journey. Basically, the version that we got our hands on managed to get its way to Montreal. So why is this important? It's important because we now have another war in the Ukrainian area. So you can see the old map of the Crimea, and then you can see the new map. And that Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014. And we currently see a lot of news feeds with regard to Russia's invasion, which began on the 24th of February, 2002. So you have these 2 wars almost 170 years apart. And I suppose what I was wondering was, are the conditions the same? Does war bring everything to the lowest common denominator? When you destroy everything, all the amenities, does that mean you get the rats, the infestation, the pestilence that would have happened 170 years ago? And this is just an image of, I find it curious that it's called the Crimean War, because most of the battles actually happened on a peninsula within Turkey. And there's also a place called Scutari on the map. You'll see Constantinople. And Scutari is quite a long way from the Crimea itself. And Scutari was the name of one of the hospitals that was used for the casualties. And the other famous hospital was Balaclava. And we've all heard the term a balaclava. What is a balaclava? And it's a woolen cap that people wear. but it actually emanates from this particular conflict. And this is a picture of the hospital at Carlow, where the nuns actually worked. What's also curious is there's a picture of the convent that she actually left, which still stands in Carlow. And there's Carlow Courthouse, and there's a cannon. And what's remarkable about the cannon is that cannon is actually a Russian war trophy. It's a Russian cannon from the Crimean War, pointing directly from the courthouse at the people of Carlow. And what's even more interesting is that, so you have the Russian cannon, no mention of the two nuns that went off and did great work. So hopefully for the 170th anniversary, we'll right that wrong and get the ladies remembered. So what happens, a letter came to the Reverend Mother in the house, and at the beginning of it reads, the government have virtually applied for sisters and offered to pay their expenses, as there is no time to be lost. I beg you to send candidates on Tuesday or Wednesday to St. Catherine's if their service be not required on return. The eyes of the whole world will be on these poor nuns. I know you will select those that will give the most glory to God. And they will want to supply clothing, etc. 5 nurses from Bermondsey had already gone. So the letters were read that morning, and sure, all the nuns signed up, but they all couldn't go. So they picked 2 nuns. One was Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle, and the other nun that was picked was a lady called Sister Mary Heffron. But I've not been able to find out much about Sister Mary Heffron, but we do know that she went. And there's a picture of Carlow train station that still stands today, that they would have got the train from to leave to go to the Crimea. That morning, they had early mass, which was celebrated by one of the priests from Carlow College, which was a seminary at the time. And off they went to get the train. So basically, this is a map of Europe. So they leave Dublin, they head to Dublin, they get on the boat, they go across to the UK, England, then they cross through France, they go down through the Mediterranean, and they head for what is now Istanbul, Constantinople. So it was quite the journey, really. One of the curious tales that they tell within the story is about this is a bit COVID-like, one size fits all. So what happens is they saw the posh English ladies and their uniforms, but the problem was the ladies and paid nurses wore the same costume. A very ugly one it was. It seemed to be contract. And all of the same size. So it meant the ladies who were tall had short dresses. The ladies who were small had long dresses. They consisted of grey tweed wrappers, worsted jackets, white caps, short woolen cloaks, and to include a frightful scarf of brown holland embroidered in red with the words Scutari Hospital. That ladies could be found to walk in such a costume was certainly a triumph of grace over nature. So I think that the wonderful thing about this diary is that, I think when you reflect on events 30 or 40 years after, there's a certain wry honesty to the way that you can tell the story. The next piece comes, so they travel across to get to Constantinople, only to find out that Florence didn't want them at all. So they find out that they weren't wanted in Scutari. So that must have been devastating, for them. What would they do? And how would that work out for them? But all wasn't lost. So they ended up going to this little chapel of a local convent in Galata, which is nearby, and had quite the Christmas. They even had 6 masses and benediction on Christmas Day. So that they didn't waste their time. They did an awful lot of praying that particular Christmas. Christmas was over, and we hourly expected that they'd get news from the headquarters. We longed to be at work, and every day we heard that the poor soldiers were dying by the hundreds. And we idled close by. Reverend Mother was in correspondence with the authorities, etc. But she basically finds out then that 5 of them were to proceed to Scutari Hospital, and that they were needed there. The rats. This was one of the most profound pieces that I found out, and there's a couple of stories about the rats. So she talks about their first encounter with the rats, the first day they were in Scutari. Of course, we expected to be sent to the wards at once. Sister Mary Agnes and the writer were sent to the store to sort clothes. They'd been eaten by the rats. Reverend Mother and Sister Mary Elizabeth were either in the kitchen or another store. In the dark, damp gloom of the shed, we set out to work and did the best. But indeed, the destruction accomplished by the rats was something wonderful. A lovely turn of phrase. How can destruction and wonderful and rats all be in the same sentence? All the wool and goods had been feasted upon sumptuously, and they were running about us in all directions. We begged of the sergeant to leave the door open, that we might make our escape if they attacked us. You see, our home rats would run away if you hushed them, but you might not, but you might hush away the Scutari rats, but they took the slightest bit of notice. She tells another story of the rats later on, which is quite profound. I really like this letter. It's quite short, but it says a lot. A hurried line to my convent home, St. Leo's in Carlow, ran as follows. Scutari Hospital, January 1855. My dearest Reverend Mother, you are no doubt very anxious for some news from the 2 dear ones now so far away. I am here at this place so often talked of. And what am I doing? If you could only get one look at this dreadful place, it would never leave your mind or heart, but you would be consoled to see the sisters in the midst of so much suffering. The hospital consisted of long corridors, as far as your eyes could reach, with beds on each side. As I write, poor fellows, both wounded and frostbitten, lie on the floor. We're in the wards late and early. We go to our apartment to get a couple of hours rest. We groan in anguish at the thought of all we have left undone. Pray so much for us, my dear mother. In great haste, your ever fond, Mary Aloysius. I really grudge the few minutes I have taken to write this. Don't expect letters. And again, as you work through the stories of who was there, what it was about, what I like to try and find when I'm doing this historical research is images. We can have as many words as we like, but really getting pictures of these people is quite rare. And as part of my looking about, we know that 16 Mercy nuns went out there. And we know that 5 of them were from Bermondsey. And I was able to find a picture on the really good historical database, Welcome in the UK, of one of the sisters. And her name was Sister Anastasia Kelly. And we know that she went to the Crimea as part of the English contingent of Mercy nuns. And we know she was born in Rotherhithe when she entered the convent and when she died. So it's really good to think that, you know, we have lots of images of Florence Nightingale, but now I have at least 2 or 3 images of these other nuns or nurses that worked with her, which I think starts to paint a different canvas of a picture, which is really helpful. They talk about the shallow graves and the putrid stench of death. And I would imagine that that putrid stench of death is very real in some of the theaters of war within modern Ukraine where war is happening. And this is an example of some of that. She talks about, he was expected by the orderlies. A moment he raised the latch and cried out, "All right, Your Honour." Many a time I've said, "All wrong," and the poor officer, of course, went his way. And one could scarcely blame him for not entering those wards, so filled with pestilence. The air was so dreadful that to breathe it might have cost him his life. It was said that the graves were not made deep enough, and that the very air was putrid. There were no coffins, canvas, blankets that would suffice. So the picture doesn't really tell the story. It just gives you a hint of the story. But then the word really begins to illuminate when she actually diarizes what she saw. And that appeared in the Illustrated London News. I like this piece of the story because I think it's true. I would argue, and others would argue, that it was the Irish nursing nuns and the religious nuns who taught Florence and her middle-aged or middle-class English ladies how to be nurses. The difference was, you see, that those in the convents had a novitiate for 4 years. The other thing is that most of these Irish nuns had spent the last 4 years in the middle of a famine. Thousands dying of cholera and typhus. So they knew an awful lot more about how to deal with this than others. And this particular diarized piece actually tells you a bit about that. It actually says that the middle-class English ladies often regretted that they had no experience, and they leaned on the Irish nursing nuns in every difficulty. You see, Sisters of Mercy have a novitiate for 4.5 years, during which they were exercising various works of mercy. So to them, it was no new thing to face disease and death. The other part of the story is that two of the nursing nuns, the Mercy nursing nuns, died. One was Sister Winifred Spry. She died in 1855. And this is catalogued within the diary really well, and it's quite poignant. One of her dear band, Sister Winifred, got very ill during the night with cholera. She was a most angelic sister, and we were all deeply grieved. She was attacked at about 3 o'clock in the morning with the symptoms, which are now so well known to us. Every remedy was applied. Our beloved Reverend Mother never left her. She was attended to by a Father Unsworth, from whom she received the last rites of the Holy Religion, and she calmly breathed her last on the evening of the same day. A hut was arranged in which to place her remains. And so alarming were the rats, and such large animals were they, that we had to watch over the night so they would not harm or touch her. And then we get to Christmas 1855, a bit different, a bit happier, and they actually make the newspapers. So there's a front illustration of the supplement from the Illustrated London News, in which an article appears, and it talks about a Miss Wise who'd been part of their number, saying that Miss Wise had been succeeded by 16 nuns, of which there were now only 15 because Sister Winifred Spry had died. Principally Irish ladies who received instructions from Miss Nightingale and appear to be very attentive to their charge. So they make the newspapers and everything is fine. But then you find another piece in the diary about the same time, and the rats were at it again. There are a number of nice puddings, even plum puddings. And we procured what was necessary for them. But imagine the rats, the dreadful rats, sucked 100 eggs at night and killed all the chickens that particular day. So there were war with the rats. Ironically, you think that, you know, when you're in a war zone, you'd be at war with the other combatants, but it seems their constant row was with the rats. In February 1856, another one of the sisters, Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle, died. And again, she describes it, and this reminds me of COVID actually in some ways. And the first piece, it's early in 1856, peace was rumored, but her Heavenly Father demanded another sacrifice from her devoted little band. And there, Sister Mary Elizabeth was called to her martyr's crown. And I've used that illustration because that particular colour illustration was an illustration that was used online frequently to honour the nurses that died during COVID, and that notion of accepting a heavenly crown for the work that they did. So that's just to mirror their experience to our time, and it was a pestilence and disease like cholera that killed many. So by April 1856, Florence Nightingale was appointed superintendent of the nursing staff for the East. And Reverend Mother Bridgman, who had constant rows, is a great, if you really want to learn about the fights and the rows between Mother Bridgman and the Crimean War journals of the Sisters of Mercy, edited by Mary Luddy, is a really good source to go to. Such was the rows that there was a famous painting of Scutari Hospital, where that's in the National Gallery in the UK. And the original sketch, there's no nuns in it. And then there was a bit of a kerfuffle, and then Sister Mary Bridgman gets magicked into the actual painting that now hangs there. But there were some of the letters between them are politely fraught and very interesting. The other thing is that we do know a little bit about what Mary Aloysius Doyle thought of Florence Nightingale. When asked one time as to what she thought of Florence Nightingale, Mother Aloysius replied, she did not like her as she was too bossy, but that she was a great woman for getting things done for the poor, wounded, and sick. An act I would argue in diplomacy. I think there was an edge there, but I've actually found out why that edge might be. That edge might be because it's alleged that Florence Nightingale came to Dublin to the Sisters of Charity, who run Vincent's Public and Private now, who had a hospital on Stephen's Green, to train to be a nurse. And the sister said, no bother, Florence, you can train to be a nurse, so long as you take holy orders. That didn't happen, and I'm led to believe that Florence then went to Germany, I think, and learned some of her nursing trade from Lutheran nuns in Germany. So, as I said, by April 1856, their time was over. What I love about this story is that we know that Florence was with them. She doesn't talk about them in much of her writing, but she saw them off when they left. Probably making sure that they left, I say in jest, but we know that she was there to wave them off. What I also find fascinating is these nuns went to the Crimea, these nursing nuns, third class. They came home, first class, travel, which, you know, was a recognition of that particular reality. And here they are, they're back in Carlow. It's around the feast of Corpus Christi, and there's all sorts of religious celebrations for them. And that's the cathedral in Carlow, where they would have had all sorts of high Catholic mass and Latin and a Te Deum, and, you know, to welcome them home. What I find shocking about the story is that there's very little evidence that the British establishment paid a cent to these ladies for their service. But what we do find out from the diary is that the Sultan, the Turkish Sultan at the time, offered £230 sterling to the nuns for their service. The difficulty was they were supposed to work charitably or whatever. So the money did go to the religious order, but it wasn't spent on the nuns. It had to be spent on good works with the poor within the various communities in which they were. So what then to the rest of the lady's life? Sister Mary Aloysius Doyle left Carlow on November the 5th, 1857, and she was appointed superioress of Girth in the Mercy Foundation in County Galway. And I've often wondered, did this lady actually meet Lady Gregory or Yeats? Because they had places nearby in Girth. I've not been able to find anything out, but I'd be really curious. I'd be surprised if she didn't. Then in 1878, she moved to Kinvara to set up an establishment there. But there's a picture of the Mercy Convent in Girth as is. And this is an extract from the Freeman's Journal in 1876 with regard to the building of the particular convent that she actually had something to do with in Kinvara. I'm probably coming to the end of my story, and my favorite bit of the story is this. She received a letter from Queen Victoria offering her a Royal Red Cross 41 years after the event. And she replies as follows: "Sir," referring to a secretary of the Queen, "I received your letter on the 15th, intimating to me that Her Most Gracious Majesty and Queen is pleased to bestow upon me the Order of the Royal Cross in recognition of the services of my sisters in religion and my own in caring for the wounded soldiers at the Crimea during the war. My words cannot express my gratitude for the great honor which Her Majesty is pleased to confer upon me. The favor is, if possible, enhanced by permission to receive this public mark of favor at Her Majesty's hands. However, the weight of 76 years and infirmities of age will, I trust, dispense me from the journey to the palace. I will therefore, with sentiments of deepest gratitude, accept that I be permitted to receive this mark from my sovereign's favour in a less public and formal manner than you have kindly indicated." She politely said, "Thanks very much for your Red Cross, but I'm not going to the palace." I want to finish with a piece which is basically, it's an amalgamation of two anonymous poems that I found within the diary to the two sisters who passed away during their service. An adapted poem from Memories of the Crimea for Sisters Winifred and Elizabeth, an English and an Irish nursing sister of mercy who died in military nursing service during the 1853 to 1856 Crimean War. They laid them there together in their lonely graves upon a foreign strand, far, far from their dear island homes, far, far from their native lands. They bore them both to their long last home amid the clash of arms. The hymns they sang seemed sadly sweet amid war's fierce and deafening alarms. They heeded not the cannon's roar, nor the rifle's shot, but onward still they sadly went to gain a lowly spot. And there, with many a fervent prayer and many a word of love, they lowered Sister Winifred and Sister Elizabeth into a lowly grave, for each of them a simple cross above. The caring nursing sisters both had gentle souls. They were both timid, fearful things, whom like startled fawns had sought convent's sheltering wings. They had left with glad and bounding hearts a world they could not love. Amid the cannon's roars and hostile shores, they laid the nursing sisters down to die. With a purer, deeper love, they cared for all those soldiers brave. They left peaceful convent homes for soldiers sinking souls to save. They went to the battlefield not to gain applause. They sought not empty fame. Those they tended to might not have even known their history and maybe not their name. No honors waited on their path. No faltering voice was nigh, for they only sought to toil and love amid the battlefield where soldiers set out to kill, maim, and die. They raised no trophy to their name. They erected no stately bust to tell the stranger where they rest, commingling in the dust. They left them there in the Crimea in a lonely grave, beneath a faraway foreign sky, where they had taught soldiers how to live, caring for slain soldiers as they taught them how to die. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Paul. That was really interesting. It was most enlightening. So thank you. I just wondered, the first letter that the nuns received inviting them to go to Crimea, who was that from?
It was from a bishop, a local bishop.
A local Catholic bishop?
Yes. basically who'd send out a plea. So I think I have I have a copy of it actually. And basically, yeah, it was so I don't know where that emanated from or how it came to be or whatever. And there's some background, but
So does that suggest that the Catholic hierarchy?
yeah, I would imagine that
At some point must have
I
decided.
think there was a powwow somewhere in higher echelons of society.
That's very interesting.
And as well as that, you already had 6 mercy nuns that had gone from Bermondsey anyway. So that was where it was at. But I think what I like, the title, Are There No Such Nurses or Ladies in England? I thought was quite interesting. But they clearly had something to offer because these women had spent 4 years in the middle of a famine.
So they clearly saw themselves as part of the empire, even after the famine and all that had gone on. They were still part of the empire. And
Even the way the letter is written, you know, I don't get a hint of republicanism.
Oh, no.
No. But the other side of it is, although I say they didn't get paid money, they kind of did by proxy. But I like to make something out of the fact that I've no evidence that they actually got paid money other than from the Sultan, which is fascinating. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paul. I really enjoyed that. I have to say it was brilliant. Just a couple of points. When you named our siblings, I noticed there was only the boys' names were evident. The girls' names weren't there. Just a little point.
Not my research, somebody else's.
Well, they didn't name the women again. The other thing, we all celebrate Florence Nightingale on the 12th of May.
Yeah.
You know, all over the world. And
That's because it's her birthday.
yeah, but I think like you know what, I'm still an active nurse working, and I'm just thinking, you know, we start planning in January, you know, to do something on the 12th of May. And I'm just thinking from an Irish perspective now that perhaps we should mention this band of wonderful nursing nuns, and their influence on Florence Nightingale, and as you rightly said, their experience from the famine, and brought that experience to the Crimean War, because that's never mentioned. And unless we get that information out there to future generations of young nurses, it'll be lost. And I think it's a very valuable piece of history.
Thank you very much. There is some research done around this and the notion of the model of nursing that these nuns were about, and it's called the careful model of nursing. And I suppose I'm not going to say that Florence plagiarized what they did, but she certainly copied it. Or certainly, and I mean, they do say that copying or imitation is the best form of flattery. If it's that good, you know, but it'd be nice to get these ladies honored. There is a plaque actually in the cathedral in Belfast with a list of all their names on it that we can get. And I've got another image as well with a list of all their names on it and where they came from. So we can actually name them and identify which of the convents they came from across the country. So some came from Cork, Dublin, Carlow. So we can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go on.
Thank you, Paul. That was so interesting. And I'm from Carlow, so it's of special interest to me. But I was going to ask, is there anything locally and that to mark Sister Mary Doyle? No, okay.
Yeah. And that kind of annoys me quite a lot because, you know, that's not the only example of an Irish nurse who was involved in a conflict where, you know, the others get remembered. I did a lot of work on getting Nurse Kehoe remembered in 1916.
Yeah.
And she was, you know, the first civilian casualty.
Yes, yeah.
It seems just amazing to me that the canon is still there. And there's nothing to the two. And I mean, there's only a couple of 100 yards between St. Leo's Convent and the courthouse.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's literally around the corner.
Yeah.
So it would be quite interesting. No, it's in hand. And, you know, I want to see something done. But I do think that a discussion needs to take place about, you know, what these nuns gave to nursing history. And like some of the excerpts from Miss Smythe, who said that, you know, they leaned on these nuns to learn how to cope with all this.
Yeah.
You know, because these people had no experience. So yeah, I think it's really important that we do something to remember them. and what they've
And
done.
the contribution, absolutely,
You
you
know,
know, and they
so-
did have the experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that really has to be highlighted. Yeah. Thank you, Paul, so much.
Cheers. one
That
more.
was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, just again, in praise of Mercy Sisters, I myself attended the Mercy convent in the Catherine McCauley Foundation site in Coolock from 1976. I never heard, well, admittedly, there weren't that many sisters still teaching, but I never heard mention of that there were nursing sisters, which I would have loved to have kind of heard a bit about, and I never heard mention of Sister Mary Doyle. There is a resource centre there with a little bit of memorabilia. I don't know if there's anything about her there, but it might be worth just.
Well, in Bagot Street?
No, in Coolock.
In Coolock?
Yeah,
Um,
there's some photos and there's a wall with some information, but I just can't recall who it's kind of remembering.
I got the copy of the book that I got with regard to the Crimean War diaries. I was actually gifted by their archives, which is in Bagot Street.
Yes.
Who actually gifted me the actual copy of that. But again, it's about first sources. So what I then did was, okay, someone else had transcribed that diary into the version that was published about 6 or 7 years ago. But I wanted to find the original primary source and was lucky enough then to find it. Believe it or not, it was on the shelves of Harvard Library. And a digital copy was found, and that's how I'm able to share it. So I have a good imprint of that particular diary, and Harvard Library, Harvard, yeah, and so it was found as a digital copy there, and I managed then to get a really good imprint, courtesy of my colleague and researcher, the editor of the Carlow. But we're thrilled to have it. It's a great story, and the other bit I really like about the story is, you know, who would have ever thought that a nun would leave a town which was 5 miles away from the fellow who led the charge of the Light Brigade? You know, that's, you know, you can't make that stuff up. Like, it's really quite bizarre.
I was just going to say about Mercy House in Bagot Street and how that may be a good resource. I don't know if you've heard of the late Sister Eugene Nolan. She was in the Martyr, and she was a Sister of Mercy, and she was a historian as well, and she brought out an excellent book, and it was about the order and the history. I have a copy of it, and you're more than welcome to it if it would be of any help.
There's just one further source that may be of help, and that's the Delaney archives in Carlow College, which is a seminary that's been in existence right next to St. Leo's Convent since 1792. So there may be some correspondence there, but I think the story has to be told, and it's always good when you've got an anniversary that's a neat round number. So like 170th anniversary, coupled with another war happening in the same region in these days, and images of the individuals, because that really powers it up when you've got a physical image. Listen, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you so much.